I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Hey, you're listening to Project Recovery, and we're listening to Arch's story and kind of where he's been and where he's going. We found out that he started drinking, smoking, and sex at 12, ended up in rehab at age 23, and now he's got a fascinating story because you're giving back to the community like so many people do in the recovery world. You're an interventionist, and I'm really excited to find out more about this because you hear the term all the time, and there was a popular show on A&E, and it was intervention. And what is an interventionist?
Yeah, well, an interventionist is someone who helps loved ones and friends intervene where there's addiction and to get them to go to residential treatment, to put it simply. And that's probably the goal is to get them in. I'd say there's, depending on the interventionist strategy and why they're in it and how they view addiction and those types of things. And I'll speak for my company. We look at it as a family system thing, and we actually quite frequently, very frequently actually, end up having one of the family members enter rehab at the same time. So it's it can be a codependent work that they're doing. And we work with the family and the client. We generally tell them it's a year relationship because depending on the releases that the client wants, and most of our situations, the clients actually are appreciative. We're effective in gaining their confidence. And we do what's known as the Johnson-style intervention, so it makes that even more remarkable, I'll say, because it's the surprise approach.
Kind of like people have seen on TV or in a movie where...
Come in here, sit down, we got some letters for you.
Yeah, and we've been they don't know it, but we work for, it's usually days. You want to move quickly when you get hired. Because there's one way or another, it just manages to get figured out. The addict figures it out if you wait too long.
It would be like a family member comes to you and says, my loved one is really struggling. I think they need to be in recovery. Yep. What do you do next when they come to you?
We ask quite a few questions to figure out whether we have a viable, ethically sound, intervention situation. Because quite often we don't. And we figure out whether we have the right finances in order, whether there's a team, because we put together a team typically between 3 and 8 people who are the most important people. Some of them can be people from the past in the addict's life. We look for leverage and influence are the two things that interventionists look for. So, and that can be emotional, financial, leverage, and influence.
And those are things to get the person to agree to go to treatment?
Right,
or?
Yeah, because what we know about addicts is they're addicted behind a wall of denial. Right, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
and the way people recover is to have a crisis in their life, or multiple crises, where that denial gets cracked open. So an intervention is nothing more than hopefully a knowledgeable, informed, clinically sound, ethical, and I'm going to say the intervention business is pretty scary, to be honest, overall, because there's a lot of stuff that happens that doesn't meet those things I just mentioned. But hopefully it's done well, and it's sophisticated, and it's extremely loving, even though that's awkward and counterintuitive to the family members who are just learning about this. They think, how could that be compassionate and loving? Yep. And so what it is it's a structured, compassionate crisis.
Kind of like you're controlling in a healthy way, the rock bottom.
We're creating a crisis. They don't get a choice. Well, they do because they're adults. The choice, they don't get a choice as to when they go and where they go. And I mean, some interventionists might give a couple of treatment centers as an option, but we generally don't like to do that. Their choice really is to take the help now or accept boundaries that we've trained each of the members of the team.
And the team are the family and friends.
Family and friends and employers. This is a tricky part of this business. If the person's employed, and most of the time, well, not most of the time, probably 50% of the time they are. They might be the caregiver of the family and the other 50%. But if they're employed, because we're looking for leverage and influence, and statistically, male addicts, the last thing they'll let go of in their lives as their lives are falling apart is their job.
Yeah.
They'll let go of their wives and kids before they'll let go of their job.
It's their identity.
Yeah, totally, and their security.
Yeah,
not really their security, not their spiritual security.
If it was their security, they wouldn't be treating it the way they're treating it.
So what we do is, with the total understanding of the family and the importance of this, we're always anticipating the addict's incredibly well-crafted and sophisticated defenses of why they don't need to go. We are totally prepared for that. But what's the one that the men are going to say overwhelmingly? I can't go.
Who's going to pay for this house?
Yep.
Who's going to do all this stuff?
So I won't have a job when I come back. So we literally, it's that one of the hardest parts of my job as the guy that runs the intervention. But I contact the employer right before the intervention, and I tell them.
What's that like? Because you mentioned earlier ethics, and now I'm going, my head's spinning with like the crossover there. Because of course I understand the necessity, but now we're. How often would you say you're telling the employer for the first time that there's a problem?
I would say nearly 100% of the time they say, "Oh, well, that explains things."
Okay.
Now I'd say that maybe it isn't nearly 100% because often the employer, I mean, you could have a partner in a law firm. So it's very different depending on the type of, and sometimes the employers have an equal problem. So we get a lot of information about the dynamic of the person's work life, and we find the right person in, if it's a bigger company, they're bound by FMLA.
Right.
And there's an EAP. That's nice when I have that because I can call and in confidence discuss it. But the cool thing is that pretty much all of them are like, hey, get him the help. Here's a guy, because you guys tell me, but I was this way. We are actually addicts are above average in their work.
Yeah.
We're darn good. We just can't be counted on.
Yeah.
But we're really good.
Spurts of intensity.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah. So they're like, hey, this is going to be kind of hard, but we want them back healthy. And sometimes I have to help them understand that. But we really don't ever have a problem with that. Now, if they just got the job, that's tougher.
It's different. And have you ever had an employer say, oh, we're out, we're going to let him go?
No, we did have one not long ago where it was a real estate brokerage firm, and the broker was just like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm not going to do but they didn't say they were. Then they ended up not firing the person. So
they just didn't want to be a part of the intervention.
Yeah, which was sad because that's a really good leverage thing.
Oh, I bet.
Yep, yeah. To be able to say once in a while we'll actually have the employer in the intervention.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes we'll even hold the intervention in the employer's office.
How effective is an intervention of getting the client to treatment?
There are no official statistics on that, but I would support what you see out there is people say 85, 90%. But I know that varies a lot because, again, there's no standard licensure. There is a certification that they're trying to get going. It's actually, I don't know why, out of the state of Pennsylvania, but they use it nationally, and it's just so much in its infancy. I'm not even though I'm fully qualified to get it, I'm not doing it yet because I don't believe in kind of the people that they have supervise it. I think are very questionable. So I'm just sort of waiting, and I support the process of certification coming along, but it's just too immature at this point.
How does somebody go about figuring out if they need an interventionist or how they might be helpful to the addicts or the family or the loved ones?
Sure. Well, making some calls, talking to. There's not many people nowadays that don't know somebody who's been through this kind of stuff. So asking, well, first of all, the minute whoever's listening now thinking they might be interested in it, don't talk to family members. Don't talk to anybody until you've done some checking around, because the cat gets out of the bag real fast that an intervention's coming along, and then the addict
wisens up.
Yeah, and it takes away its high effectiveness,
its sting.
Yeah, so I think it's really important with the unregulated sort of Wild West nature of the intervention business to trust a reputable treatment center like Pinnacle. Trust the experts there to say, hey, who have you seen good work from? That kind of thing. Trust friends who you've known who are in recovery in AA or Al-Anon or, other programs. Read. There's one book I would strongly recommend. In fact, we have almost every client read this book. It's called Love First by Deborah and Jeff Jay. They were one of the first interventionists. They've been around 30, 40 years. And it's an excellent book, very readable for family members, and it actually tells you how to do an intervention, but it also says right in there, if you can do it, we recommend you hire one. But it's an excellent book.
Mm-hmm. What does an interventionist cost?
They range from, last time we checked, we're $50,000. I'm just kidding. Good luck getting business. Right?
Yeah, right.
But they range from, I've heard them as low as $2,000 or $2,500 to as high as $18,000. I don't mind saying we're $8,500.
Okay.
And go ahead.
And that would, if a person had that money available, that would hire you or someone like you to be able to come in and guide them through the whole process of the intervention and helping identify treatment centers and communicating with, like you said, the employer and putting together the team. And
yeah, thank you. That's great. In fact, you added all of the above, yes. And actually, my business partner is my wife, who's a retired attorney, and she handles a lot of the aspects of the process, working with the family, helping them prepare their letters. She's also in long-term recovery on the family side of things. Actually was a part of an intervention herself with her brother years ago, which is how she got into it. But we have one of the things about my story I didn't tell you was about 10 years ago when I left the world of finance and started working on my master's degree. I also worked as a financial mergers and acquisition consultant in the national treatment industry marketplace, and I founded 2 treatment centers. Actually, I'm working on another concept as we speak. And so in that process over the last 10 years, I went to conference after conference and really got to know the industry and the different types of programs. And, there's roughly 30,000 treatment centers out there. And so I learned a lot about the industry and the different programs that are available. And that is what a good interventionist also provides is the right choice of place to go.
Well, it's that expert knowledge. I mean, that's why, we go to the mechanic we go to or the dentist we go to or the interventionist. These are people that are well studied and experienced. And so, I would imagine you need to work with somebody like yourself who has that base of knowledge, because unless you do that, you don't have it. I'm a psychologist, but I don't know those things because that's not been my world. And so it sounds like maybe $8,500 is a pretty good bargain for somebody who is able to bring all that fund of knowledge and networking into your life if you need an intervention for a loved one.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas.
In the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
We have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
How long does an intervention take? Does that make sense? I mean,
sure.
If someone is worried about a loved one and they want to get help for them, they call you. Is it a month? Is it 2 weeks?
Right. I would say the sweet spot is usually within 10 days. It's that quick.
Yeah, it's very fast. Sounds
and we, quite often, if not most of the time, by the time they start hearing about everything that has to happen, they start to backpedal a little, and they'll often start to question, well, maybe it's not quite that bad yet. And we're like, listen, if you pick the phone up and you're calling, it's
Do you find
time.
that a lot, though? The family members might start to feel reluctant or guilty about what they're asking you to help them with?
Well, being a family system, you're a psychologist, you're a guy in recovery, works for a treatment center. I mean, it's a family system deal.
Sure.
And there's certainly other addictions. We talked about process addictions and things too. When you add up all the eating and gambling and gaming and sexing and spending and porn, and all of that on work on top of the chemical addictions, we have some statistics that we think 70% of people are afflicted in some way that they're suffering.
That's very believable.
Yeah, right. So we have a lot of just codependent denial going on.
You probably have to deal with that every single time.
I would say to use that word there's an old phrase: if you cut an alcoholic or an addict, they bleed codependence. So it's kind of the trunk of the tree of. But so we need to move quickly, not just because the addict might figure it out, but we've got to keep everybody on task and keep the energy that was there in the beginning going.
Yeah, it's a whole system you're managing.
Mm-hmm.
You said something early on in the podcast that addiction it's a family problem. When I was in my addiction, one of the things I got good at telling people is like, what do you care? This is me. I'm doing it to me. I'm not doing it to you. Now, in recovery, I can tell that I was doing it to them, and they were affected by it. And I think that's the thing, is that you want to make sure that the family realizes that they need to be a part of the solution, and they need to help out.
Yeah, and I'd say most interventionists do take care of that. Here's a tricky kind of side angle that I think is good to look for in an interventionist, is an understanding of, Mr. Psychologist, of the roles that we take in our families. And the addict is typically the scapegoat. And so the family is all focused. By the time an intervention is needed, you're not sure whether the family, they aren't sure whether they love them or hate them.
Right.
And they're all pointing at that. There's the problem in our family system. Yeah. So there is an intervention doesn't happen where I'm not calling, and they know it's coming. I'm not in the middle of the intervention, and once in a while the intervention's over in 5 minutes. We had one recently where the woman came up from her bedroom. There were 7 of us in there from out of state, and she stood there and she didn't even sit down. She said, "I'm going."
Oh, wow.
Yep, and it was wonderful.
She was ready for it.
But I'm prepared, and I tell people, I'm going to throw you under the bus, Dad, or wife.
So you call them out on their behaviors.
And I'll sit there, and whenever it's appropriate, I'll say, hey, you're just the one who's got the wreckage going on with substances to where you're going to die any day or get thrown in prison. You're the hero here, though. You're going to help bring health into this family system for any of these people that want to jump along and admit that you're just the one that's bringing attention to a very sick, multi-generationally sick system.
That person's become the scapegoat, and that allows everyone else to live in their denial about their own contribution.
Right. And of course, I'm here because I am impressed with Pinnacle. We haven't done work yet together, but I'm impressed with you guys. We are really picky about who we work with. And there has to be the right modalities and approach. It has to be respectful of the family system aspect of all of that, be more oriented towards family system and trauma work than managed care. with all due respect, which is tough to say this because the monies follow the whole DSM mental illness model, and we're not real big fans of that, but there isn't. We realize we got to work with that,
right?
And so.
And I just want to mention this, and I'd love to know if you agree or not. The reason that we talk about family systems is because we know that that's what works. That these old models of just working just with the person who is the identified addict, the long-term outcomes of that work is not good. Yeah. And what we do know works is when we get in and we study a family system, we get everybody involved. And like you said, the people that are struggling with codependence or their own process addictions or their contribution, if you can get the whole family system healthy, then that person who's the identified patient, they get healthy and stay healthy at a much higher rate than in the old model. And so I want to be clear to people that that's the reason that folks like you feel it absolutely necessary. It's based in research. It's based in outcomes.
Spot on. And I think you'll agree with me that if at the very least, what we're doing is helping the addict gain self-esteem and deal with their fears so that if the family doesn't kind of come around, they're strong enough to set boundaries.
They're the ones that end up setting boundaries with a sick family system.
Yeah, most families will.
And sometimes the person has become the scapegoat because they didn't know how to do that. They grew up in that system. They didn't know how to survive in that system and set boundaries and limitations. So they medicated themselves to get to where they have an addiction, but they need that support and help to sometimes turn back around and set the limits on the family that's contributing to that process of addiction.
Yep.
Arch, I want to thank you for stopping by and talking to us because this has been amazing. We like to leave our guests with one final thought. So what would you say, when is the perfect time to call an interventionist?
I would say, when there's been, when your gut tells you that you're really afraid for a loved one. You're afraid for tomorrow.
Yeah. I like that. Dr. Matt, I think this has been a fascinating, very insightful, very knowledgeable podcast, and I want to say thanks for him, but what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to talk with Arch and to let people know that this is available to them. I think so many people that have responded to our podcast this year have said things like they don't know where to go to get help. They don't know what's available to them. Most people, I think, listening to this may not even realize that somebody like Arch and his company is available to help with an intervention. We see interventions on TV. Sometimes they're promoted in sort of a joking kind of catastrophic way. But the reality is I think it's one of the most loving things you can do for a family member or a friend who is, that you are afraid for their future, that you feel like we just don't know what else to do.
There might not be a tomorrow.
I'm glad that we're able to talk about that.
Arch, if people want to get a hold of you and find out more about your business, you got a website?
Sure do. It's called, it's Recovery Elevated Solutions, plural.com. RecoveryElevatedSolutions.com.
You addicted to long words or what? Couldn't find a shorter one?
I tried.
One more time?
RecoveryElevatedSolutions.com.
All right. Hey, thank you very much. And if you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. Thank you very much, Dr. Matt, Arch, and, of course, Joshy back there behind the control panel. You're listening to Project Recovery, a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.